Do short-term rentals get recorded as a Schedule E rental activity, or are they a Schedule C business? Well, I'm going to dive into when it makes sense for each form, because you could possibly use either one depending on what you're doing with the rental activity. But I'm also going to talk about, before we do that, what is the difference between Schedule C and E from a tax perspective, and why might you want to move it over to Schedule C instead of a Schedule E? So Schedule E is going to be where you report rental activities. So it could be short-term rentals, long-term rentals. It could be a house, could be a car, a piece of equipment. Doesn't matter. All that is rental activity that by default goes on Schedule E. So most rental activities, be it long-term, short-term, are still going to be on Schedule E. To move over to Schedule C, you need to move it into a business, because Schedule C is where you report business income. And so why are there different forms, and how are they taxed differently? Well, there is the self-employment tax. Businesses are subject to self-employment tax, which is an additional 15% on top of the regular income tax. But when we're talking about rental properties, a lot of times we have losses, so that doesn't a lot of times apply. What we're really looking at more is those passive activity rules. So by default, rental activity reported on Schedule E is going to be a passive activity. And Schedule C businesses are going to be non-passive or active. And there's a difference. And in the world of taxes, that difference really comes down to being able to utilize losses. So active income, not only your business income, but if you have W-2 or other income that is non-passive, that income or the passive loss, let's say, of a rental property, you can't offset that active income using those passive losses. There are rules and restrictions around it. There are cases where you can, but generally there's limitations on how you actually can utilize those and taking those losses to offset that. So a lot of times you're limited. And so the idea is, for the short-term rentals, we want to move that off of Schedule E and try to get it on Schedule C, so then we can classify it as an active or a non-passive activity, and we can offset some of our other W-2 or other active income to help reduce our taxes. That's the idea behind it. And so how do we do that? Well, being a short-term rental, as I already mentioned, short-term rental doesn't automatically move you into a business, right? You're still performing a rental activity. You're just renting it. Short-term rental is usually, we're talking about 7 days or less being the average rental time. So if you're renting it for 7 days or less versus renting it for months or years at a time, that doesn't really change the nature of the fact that you're just still performing rental activities. You haven't moved it to a business just because you're renting it less time. That's not what it takes to move to a business. What does it take to move to a business? And I want you to think of things like an actual B&B, not an Airbnb, but a good old bed and breakfast out somewhere. What is the difference between that and what your typical Airbnb rental activity is? Well, those bed and breakfasts, the big thing that I think is the services that you're providing, right? At bed and breakfast, they're going to clean your room, right? They're going to come in, make your bed, maybe vacuum, give you fresh towels, maybe even wash the sheets and change the sheets periodically. They're going to do that while you're actually staying in that room, right? So if you stay for 4 days, they might come in every single day and at minimum clean out the trash, but at most do all those changing sheets and making beds and all those types of things. Those are additional services that you don't typically provide with an Airbnb, right? You're going to do those things after they leave because you're going to clean it up for the next tenant. But while they're there, you're not going to provide those services in most cases, right? If you do, now maybe you're performing services that you can classify as a business. Those are the things that we need. You need those services to be an actual business. Now, things like recreational equipment. If you have recreational equipment, let's say you have a Airbnb and it's on the coast, it's a beach house, right? And you've got a surfboard for them. Well, having a surfboard available to them to use while they're there to stay isn't any different than renting out the home, right? It's just a piece of equipment. It's part of the home, part of what you're renting, and so you're still performing that rental activity, even though you have some recreational equipment in a surfboard. Now, if you're providing lessons on how to surf while they're staying in your property, now that is a service, and so maybe you are in sort of a business category. So these are the things that can lean you over there, just providing those things that don't always necessarily make you a business. And so, but those are the kind of activities or services that you need to provide if you want to move your short-term rental from a Schedule E to a Schedule C. So hope that clears it up. Any questions, leave in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching.